Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Project Flux podcast. And today on the spotlight, we have Johnny Morris, who is the co-founder and chief product officer of Fifth Dimension. Welcome, Johnny.
Hello, happy to be here.
And thank you for your invitation a few months back when I got to appear on your podcast. I really enjoyed the conversation, and I've been really looking forward to carrying on the conversation, really, but also this time with Yoshi. So Yoshi's with us. How are you, Yoshi?
I'm good, mate. How are you?
Yeah, very good. Very good. Very, very excited for this discussion with Johnny, because Johnny's got a interesting background. Just before we go into the podcast, just a little bit, if you could say a little bit about yourself and your journey, Johnny, because you've got quite a long background in analytics, research, data strategy roles, and you've done loads of other things before Fifth Dimension. So just to kind of set the context, can you just give people a very kind of potted history of your journey?
Yeah, I've been busy. I feel like I've spent my career building technology in industries that don't love technology. I don't know what that says about me.
Sucker for punishment.
Yeah, exactly. Mostly in like real estate, real assets, finance. Funny, actually, I grew up my dad was a property developer, so I grew up suddenly as a teenager on site. Very involved in the family business, and then loved science. So ran as far as I could towards technology, but then ended up working with a lot of focus on like real estate and the built place and real assets much more.
So that time, when you were working for, seeing your dad working as a property developer, was there something in there, do you think, that you thought, that's a problem I've got to solve when I get older, when I grow up? Or was it just a coincidence?
Good question. So I love buildings and properties, and I love the vision that you need to like turn something into something new, whether it's a field into a load of houses or the family specialism, a 300-year-old, mostly derelict, grade 2 listed monastery into something useful for the community, houses in the grounds, maybe some flats, maybe some community stuff there. The thing that I always felt personally, though, was that it's extremely high risk and capital intensive to do as an individual. And personally, I think my skill set, I worked out that I could have a lot more impact personally and leverage, and like unique leverage, helping people with technology. So I always I felt like I could basically build more with like the data analytics tools, data science tools than I could with bricks. Was how I thought about it.
Yeah, makes sense.
And so I spent most of my working career initially as a data analyst, and then getting more into data science, like working on automated valuation models of places like HomeTrack, and then starting to build products with kind of intelligence and data at the core, and doing that at big corporates like Countrywide.
Yeah.
But also at other startups. I launched a geospatial analytics platform with a friend of mine that has kind of a bundle of Fortune 100 clients, and then also built out the kind of the analytics engine, pricing, property risk, asset risk, all that kind of stuff for Way Home, which was a platform for introducing institutional investors to single family homes.
Okay.
So I've spent a lot of my time building technology that ultimately ends up in someone having to read a PDF. And my God, have I been cursed by that PDF, right? Or like,
it's not going anywhere, is it?
Yeah.
But did you, because your father was in property development, right? And you came at it from a very different angle. Have you ever bounced ideas off of him? How did he take all that information?
Yeah, he has been a very involved advisor of my career choices and business choices throughout most of my life.
You get unfiltered advice from your folks, don't you? That's for sure.
100%. He's also very much larger than life character. It is very unfiltered and very opinionated.
But that's what you need. You need the honesty.
He would argue I rarely listen, but that's not true. I just filter.
But you just need to know the times to listen and the times to totally ignore the advice. Exactly. But it sounds like, my experience coming from a surveying background was there was definitely a gap to fill in the overall kind of built environment space. And the data analytics feels like we've still got a long way to run in terms of data analytics and now AI. And I think it's interesting that the RICS, obviously, who governs a lot of what we do in real estate, they're about to introduce a new pathway to become a chartered member, which is as a data analyst. Could you imagine that happening sort of 10, 15 years ago? So things are moving
I remember
on.
10, 15 years ago looking at whether I could get chartered through a technology route and just being horribly rebuffed.
Okay, see, so that's how far things have gone.
Just
now that's
like
going to hopefully become a formal way of becoming a charter surveyor. So it's good to see that happening, but I still think it's the very beginning of a journey. But before we go on and talk a bit more about, what Fifth Dimension does and some of your thoughts, before we started recording this, you said there's just so much going on. And I said to hold your thoughts there, because these are the kind of stuff we just want to capture. What's going on, Johnny? What's the things sort of occupying your mind at the moment?
So I think there's specifically a lot going on for us, because like Fifth Dimension is a real estate focused AI business. And we work with primarily money people in real estate. So we're primarily working with asset managers, investment managers, equity houses, with real estate teams, and then like those vertically integrated organizations that have money and do stuff. So I think what's going on is a lot of those organizations, ranging from some of the biggest in the industry to some of the smallest, are getting a lot more serious about delivering useful business outcomes with AI, essentially.
Yeah.
So I would say the quality of the conversation we're having with kind of senior people in these organizations has gone from kind of like, we're thinking about this and we've kind of got a 2025 plan and there's a committee and someone's just spent $300K on Copilot and, maybe we're going to build something in-house, to, okay, we tried all of that and we've learned some stuff, but now actually maybe we've got a vision, maybe we've got ambition, maybe there's a specific part of our business we know we can transform with this. And I would say the use cases and ambition have solidified and got much more specific. I hope we've been part of helping that, because that's always been our goal. And I think in 2026 in particular, we'll see a lot of the kind of promises or goals that people have been pushing towards are going to start coming live and start, you'll start hearing people actually talk about. And what I think will be really interesting there is you're going to have the gap between those that are actually on that path and doing it well, and those that are still kind of stuck in the, maybe there's some benefit, but let's not do anything too interesting, kind of, we'll slow roll it.
Yeah, it does feel like 2025 has been very much kind of that kind of transition year for people. They're trying to work out what this all means. And that hopefully next year, everyone's going to be a bit more educated and they're going to be able to start moving to the next phase. I think your point about Copilot is spot on. We talk a lot about Copilot, both the good things and the bad things about it. And it's not all bad, but unfortunately, too many people think Copilot is their AI strategy. And it's not the AI strategy. It could be part of an AI strategy, right? It can be quite an important part, but it's not the only part. So the other thing I wanted to touch on.
I feel like the real problem there just on... Oh, sorry.
No, go on.
I was going to say, I think the real problem there is less... There's a tiny lag, isn't there? The real problem there is... to your point on making Copilot your AI strategy, is you expect too much from the money you spend. You say, oh, it's 150K, it's 300K, and we're going to get this massive outcome. And the reality is Copilot now is more in the like table stakes category rather than the I'm going to transform my business category.
Absolutely. And I think the other problem with the Copilot rollouts that I've seen is that people kind of say, press the button. Yeah, we're going to get a Copilot rollout, but then don't do anything around the education to go with it. So people have got it. They're burning a hole in the account, but they're not seeing very much positive ROI out of it. And how you measure ROI is always difficult.
But looking back, do you think that what happened around, AI has just come in, we need to implement it in our businesses, everyone's heads on fire. Do you think there was a bit of unnecessary panic? Because, in introducing any kind of technology into the world, you're only going to find out what you want to do with something by playing with it, essentially. And it feels like, Johnny, like you mentioned, people were playing with the toy and in time have now started to develop what their pain points that they need to address are, what those verticals look like. Now we can actually move on from just experimenting with Copilot to actually understanding these specific tools and how they exist within our workflows. And I feel like that we're getting to that point. And James, you kind of mentioned it in that hype cycle thing, right? We get to a point of a peak and then we come down, but we're slowly kind of getting into a nicer position where we're getting to momentum to some extent.
Yeah. So I think you have to go on the journey. I've always thought there's no shortcuts, as in I don't think that you can go from, we've never given any of our team access to any kind of tooling or training to wonderful super AI implementation without going through that kind of, okay, let's form a group of people, let's give them tools, let's get them trained, let's show use cases. And I do think that experimentation has educated people a lot and taken them on the journey. However, there are a few things that if you speak to people that do a lot of training in the industry, they'll tell you. And one of the things that's tricky is that maybe only 1 in 10 or 2 in 10 people will go beyond the core use cases they're trained on.
That's true, yeah.
And I think that's what a lot of us who are obsessed with AI, me being one of them, have fallen in the trap of. I've certainly imagined, well, like, surely, I know this isn't true because I've worked in product long enough. But in my heart space, I'm like, well, if there's a new button in your tool you use daily, you're going to click on it, right? As soon as you see it.
We were literally
you're just gonna try everything you do all day in your new tool, just because who knows? And maybe actually you'll have 3 different tools running at once to see what's best. And
wishful thinking.
I feel like we've perhaps projected some of that onto people. And the reality is that that's not how most people think about it. Most people feel that they need more training. They want clear guidance on what's a good use case, how it works, what's not a good use case.
Yeah, I agree.
I think there's this kind of really interesting mindset of current Gen AI tools that they really benefit from having like a beginner's mindset, a growth mindset, playing with them.
Yeah.
And teaching people to be comfortable with that is a really big deal. And it's something we've got much better at, but I don't think is common. Like everyone I speak to, I spend loads of my day speaking to existing users of our product, potential users, people who don't use our system and use kind of competing ones or ChatGPT and Claude. And everyone, even the people who are like super, super advanced, has some kind of like, I only feel like I'm scratching the surface. There's so much more to learn. I wish I knew what everyone else was doing. What are Blackstone doing? What are Brookfield doing? What's my competitor doing? What's even anyone doing in the team next to me? And I feel like
doesn't
this
everyone
is really
feel like that? Like I feel like
well,
that.
this is
I'm
the
sure
point.
you
Everyone
feel like
feels
that.
I feel like that.
There's
too.
always more you can do.
Yeah,
it is crazy. Yeah. But I think the education is such an important part. It is. And the point you made about you're now able to have more intelligent conversations with some of the kind of executives, I think shows that all is not lost. Things are changing and the bar is getting higher and higher, and there's always going to be another bar to get to. But I think the one thing about the property industry generally is, well, I suppose ask you the question, what do you think there is in the property industry that means that people fundamentally misunderstand how tech should play a part in property?
That's a very big question there. So there's a few things.
Might not be one thing.
That change and rolling out technology is a muscle that organizations develop. And that is not a strong muscle in many of the organizations in the industry. And so there's a lot of room for improvement there on like rollout, training, adoption, understanding processes, change management. And the other side is, and obviously my data background here coming to play, is like a lot of the data that there isn't really data. It's in PDFs and documents and kind of disparate. Very few organizations run like a clean or even like medium clean kind of data shop. A lot of the work we do. So our core business is, of course, like the product that we help real estate professionals kind of automate their work and supercharge their work. But whenever we're sort of deeper, bigger relationships, it's always about like data pipelining and like our data is trapped in this place and we can't do stuff with it. And actually it needs to be liberated or structured and I think there's a lot of lifting and shifting of data that needs to happen in the industry. That is a specific skill that not everyone has and isn't sort of freely available. So I think that's a really interesting space. And it's not the conventional problem that maybe I've worked on in the past of like, you need an enterprise data strategy and everything needs to be governed and you can't actually do any of this until you spent 5 years really being a mature data organization. It's much more, the good thing is now, at least you can transform that data cheaply because there's so much intelligence. So if you need to get data out of your ERP and bypass the weird reporting software you've been using for the last 15 years to automate your finance processes, that's suddenly possible. And I think a lot of people are starting to realize that, but there's definitely some who are stuck a bit more and like, oh, just give me 3 more years of migrating the ERP, better data governance, and then we'll be fine. We'll survive on Copilot till then.
I recognize that exactly, and I think too many people think it's all or nothing with data. Yeah, we've either got to go through our last 20 years of data and get it all right, or we're going to, we'll forget about it. I say actually just pick a use case, just pick one stream, get that right, and start now. Because if you keep making that excuse, you'll get to 3 years' time and you'll still be in the same position. But if you start, you can deal with the legacy data when you get to it, but start now labeling, collecting your data properly, and then in 3 years' time, all of a sudden you're going to have a really good kind of data repository. And it's the old adage, isn't it? The best time to plant an oak tree was 20 years ago or today. And I think it's the same thing with data strategy. Just start now.
Yeah, 100%. And what is cool today is you can get so much more value so much quicker. I just think a lot of people haven't realized that yet.
Yeah, and I like
more
what
and
you
more
said,
people are.
Data liberation. I think that was quite an interesting term.
Yeah.
I think the interesting thing with humans is that we can work with any kind of information, right? It doesn't matter if it's structured or unstructured, or if it's messy or siloed. To some extent, we use initiative. We use the ability to communicate with each other, to be able to at least make decisions. Now, if we liberate data and we allow it to become a lot more machine readable, we allow AI to be able to infer and bring new insights, the AI can start to generate a lot more insight for us. But there's always that concern around a black box, right? When it's working with the data, especially with the architectures of generative AI models at the moment and other kind of AI models and neural networks, how can you ensure that an AI stays as an assistant? And how can you ensure that we don't lose too much of that human judgment because we're giving it all to the AI?
My fundamental position on this is that the opportunity is to supercharge your judgment and improve it. But I'll talk maybe specifically about our product philosophy and how we think about it. So Kate and I started Fifth Dimension very much with this vision that the opportunity for more intelligent technology was to supercharge professional capability. So to supercharge the professional leverage of an analyst, in an acquisitions team, of a surveyor, of anyone in the industry. And that doing that would basically create capacity to solve more problems. That creates a better industry, a better built place, and long-term, a more equitable real estate industry and experience for everyone. So we've very much got the big long-term goal in mind. And we've always seen that as human-centric and kind of leveraging that expertise. So that's kind of how we approach every product decision. Is how can we kind of take the expertise of the human and leverage it and put that at the center. How that manifests today is essentially, I think of it as trust, right? It's all about showing the root of what's happened, of an action, of an output, whether that's, where a date has come from a lease abstraction, or whether it's the assumptions from a modeling, the net operating income going up by 5%, where did that come from? So we have 3 layers to this.
Yeah.
And I'll say firstly what we don't do. What we don't do is the old school robotic process automation of, as soon as anything comes up, you click a hyperlink and it takes you to a part of a PDF where it maybe came from. Because to your point, Yoshi, these systems are much more intelligent than that. They don't just work off a single part of a single document. And so we have 3 layers. The first layer is reasoning. So we surface the reasoning behind every decision in the platform, or every decision that's made, and make that available to a user. So you can understand the kind of inner train of thought that the system has used. And we design it specifically to create that reasoning. The second then is citation. So what is that reasoning using? What documents, what memories, specifically what was in context of the model that informed that? And then finally, if you really want to dig deep, taking that citation to the specific parts of the specific documents where it came from. What that gives is this 3-layered trust and ability for a professional to really dig into what's going on. And if they disagree with it, if they disagree with the reasoning, if they disagree with the source of the information, if it's just wrong, which happens sometimes, they can correct the system, and then that can be turned into a rule in the background that gets followed in the future.
Okay.
like a really nice contrast here is like, if you think about how memory works in ChatGPT and Claude, it's increasingly invisible. Like, it doesn't really tell you when it's using stuff it's remembered about you. You know it is, because sometimes it says something really weird, like something you were working on 6 months ago. And you're like, hey, I don't, I'm not doing that project anymore. I haven't even, I'm not even reading that book. I gave it up. For memory, for us, we very visibly in the user experience highlight whenever a memory is retrieved and allow users to click through to see what that memory is and see how it was used. And we kind of have that philosophy with everything in the system. So ultimately, you can understand what's going on and kind of what context went in. And if you understand what context went in, you can understand kind of what's happening.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And I think that's been the big problem with a lot of the generative tools up till now. It's, Yoshi said, it's a bit of a black box. And then the problem is people get a bad experience, and it kind of, you've lost them for a big length of time, because they'll say, well, I've tried using it and it came up and it hallucinated. But I think the best you can do is what you've done. You've got these 3 layers of protection that you're saying. I think you're saying it's not foolproof, but when it makes an error, you can then correct it in the background. Am I correct? There's some kind of rule you can set so that it won't make that mistake again, which is the same. And this is the point I make when I speak to people about AI. You've got to treat it like a very, very smart intern, but you do have to teach it. And the more you teach it, the better it gets. And I think what you've built into your product kind of takes that to the next level. I just wanted to ask about Ellie, because I think Ellie started off as an email-based assistant, and now it's part of the kind of overall fifth dimension platform. It's something I'm seeing a lot of with AI companies, is like you're having to be agile and you're having to change features because things are moving so fast. So for you, how has that evolution, how have you approached that? How has it influenced your approach?
Yeah, I mean, one thing I will say is you said having to change. For me, this is one of the reasons we're building this business. Hold on a second, Mike. The lights went up. Oh, it's okay. The lights are okay. This is one of the reasons we're building the business. The pace of change is an opportunity, and it's super exciting. The fact that we can help people with like detailed financial modeling in Excel with all of the formulas correct, traceable, and kind of working with our template is mind-blowing. Like, I could hardly imagine we could do that at the start of the year, but now we can. That's amazing. So I think that kind of pace of change is a feature for me rather than a challenge. It's something that we are constantly embracing and part of. And it is a different way of working, of course, because you have to be very, very quick to be like, hey, this thing is now possible, or this approach is terrible. There's a whole new way we can better understand and pass documents that will make our system much more performant. You can't be too attached.
Yeah.
But Ellie's story, so the first iteration of the product was, the very, very first prototype of the product, which was 3 and a bit years ago now, was you would send the name of an area to an email address and it would give you back a really nicely crafted short description of that. That was the very, very beginning of the product. And this was just around the time ChatGPT came out. So right at the start when that blew people's minds, right?
That feels like eons ago now, but of course it's not that long ago, is it?
It's like less than 3 years, right? It's not that long ago at all. Or it's about 3 years now, maybe.
Yeah.
But what that evolved into was then a sort of us emulating, and the theory was, let's make this as much like working with a colleague as possible. So you send an email, you attach a PDF, maybe it's an evaluation report, you ask for a summary or something to extract it, and then you have that conversation via email. But it was kind of asynchronous. But you'd be emailing Ellie, and everyone really connected to this sort of personification of the product. The email experience at the time, I think, made something that would otherwise be inaccessible and a bit scary to people much more familiar, because there's still an Outlook, right? Often the old school version of Outlook, of course. No one likes the new one, apparently. Although I think you have to have the new one now. But the classic version of Outlook. Still get my head
around it.
Yeah. The classic version of Outlook. But then as the technology kind of started maturing, the first thing that you start hitting as well, we can now deal with really big files or loads of files, but you can only attach 20 files to an email. So actually, the first limitation we worked around building out a web interface was a data in concept of like, hey, you need to upload loads of files to work with. Let's put that in the web. And then we built a chat interface to make a more synchronous experience. And at this point, Ellie was maybe going to retire as a part of the product, but actually at the last minute had a major lease of life as Agent Ellie, and is now how we describe the kind of agentic backbone of our entire product that essentially understands what you're trying to do and coordinates all these different skills to get work done. Uses the memory, uses maybe a lease abstraction skill or a rent roll skill or a data room analyzing skill, and kind of pieces everything together so people can get more complicated work done, but does it all like visibly live when you can see it. And also, if you just want something really fast, which actually people often do, we'll do something quick and easy.
So Ellie's grown up and become a full-blown agent. Is that a good way to describe it?
Yeah. Ellie has been on a journey. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. From just being able to write very short area descriptions through to now being a kind of, I guess, a process coordination maestro.
Yeah. And I think it was the right, you retire, because if you retired something every time the technology changed, you'll constantly be retiring something. And what you've done is reinvented it. Or,
so I will tell you something funny.
Go on.
That I don't share because I don't want it to take off too often. But one of the key tools that we have is called Data Analysis version 3. And it's like a Excel-centric property tune data analysis tool. And one of our engineers pointed out, when you write that down, it looks like Dave. And it is a particularly remarkable step forward in the technology. And so internally, there's Ellie and there's Dave who work together.
There's a bit of competition there.
Yeah, but that is not official branding. That's not something our customers see. But yeah, in the background, Dave is working hard.
Every company needs a Dave, though. Every company needs a Dave. So you've got your Dave. It's good.
But how do you feel about the personification of AI? Generally, because like you said, the personification of Ellie made it a lot less frictional. People to actually be able to use, and they adopted it a lot more. I mean, that was kind of compounded when you had the email Outlook interface, so that dynamic was still consistent. But I mean, we hear a lot more of people now not liking that personification of AI, but kind of more in a out of the context, wider spread of AI implementation, especially within people developing, pseudo-social relationships and these sort of things. What's your take on the personification?
So I think of it as much like every product decision, which is often rooted in like psychology. It's one of those things that has pros and cons and boundaries, right? So it is much easier and narrower for us to personify your agent that specializes in real estate, that's very, very deliberately focused on and harnessed to, bounded to like real estate and getting your work done. So I feel like it's simpler for us than if we were like character AI or something like that, because the product there is all about getting your work done and is a kind of professional tool, not a consumer tool. And actually we kind of have a code of conduct, and often our customers will have like an idea about what's acceptable and what's not. And we enforce that in the sort of rules that govern the system. So Ellie is quite bounded, which I think keeps the kind of personification as a more in the space of like something that is useful and maybe a bit lighter than a fully kind of unbounded, you can do anything with it kind of person. Yeah.
It's got a natural role.
Yeah. So the way our kind of hierarchy here is we talk about the 5D, the fifth dimension platform, and then the agent Ellie is part of that. So it's kind of, but you can white label. So you can have a different personification, which some people choose to do.
Oh, and cool. Some of those people can white label the fifth dimension technology, can they?
It's still 5D, but you can have Ellie as not Ellie. It could be your company's name or a pun or something else.
Okay, Johnny, I'd like to move on to another topic. I know something that's very close to your heart, and it's all about your warnings around the hype of in-house AI. So everyone says, oh yeah, I'm going to build my own AI system, and then vibe coding is the big word. In fact, it's the Collins Dictionary Words of the Year, would you believe? And it sounds fantastic in theory. You can build anything you want, anytime you want. But what's some of the traps around that, and some of the traps that businesses fall into? And what would your warning be for businesses considering going down this self-build route?
Well, often anyone who's set on it, I normally have a conversation of like, let's have a chat in 6 to 8 weeks once you've gone on that journey and try some stuff out.
Okay.
I think there is essentially, there's a few key things. The biggest one is kind of the gap between making a great demo or something that works 7 in 10 times or something that's good for one person and a product you want to roll out to 100 people, 500 people, 1,000 people doesn't feel any smaller than it used to be.
I agree.
And what I see, I think particularly in real estate, the scale of all of the problems that, like, so take this, for example, like enterprise search is a great example here. Everyone I've spoken to in the industry that has tried to implement an enterprise search product, so plug into your SharePoint or your Box or whatever and answer all questions across all your documents. None of them have got the results they want. Whereas I know
and some of them have been downright scary, haven't they? Some of them have, confidentiality issues.
Yeah. Well, if you're working on Copilot and like 20 years of Microsoft permissions hierarchy, right? That is scary. Whereas we use Notion in our business, and we use it sort of for enterprise search. But in outside of the property documents we have, there's probably not a document in our business that's more than like 10 pages long, right? Maybe there's some contracts that are a couple of hundred, but they are in Google Docs or clean PDFs, and they're not technical drawings, they're not technical diagrams. Our spreadsheet models are quite simple. In most kind of businesses, the size and complexity and depth of your documents isn't that big. In real estate, everything is huge, right? Like everything is multimodal. It's got pictures, it's got diagrams, you've got vectorized images embedded in PDFs.
BIM models.
Which are a nightmare. Yeah, BIM models. And I think the industry doesn't work on a lot of custom tooling to work with that. It's mostly just Microsoft and SharePoint and opening stuff, right? And there are localizations. So I think one of the things that is most people misjudge is like, in a different domain, someone did this, like someone has extracted data from our supply contracts. So it would be easy extracting data from leases with Gemini 2.5. And yes, you can set up a really nice POC and it looks really cool with the one sample lease you made up in your in Gemini that's like 25 pages long. But the moment you actually go into your leasing team and like, hey guys, start using this. Can we get some example docs? Everything's on fire and nothing works. Right from how are you managing context through to like some of these PDFs are like 500 pages long and have coffee stains, through to look, actually, there's a new type of rent escalation emerging in retail leases, and none of the models have any context on this in their default training set, so they just can't understand it, and so you get nothing. That's critical to doing good work in real estate, and it's just a lot of work, and it's hard, and you need really, really skilled engineers, and so specifically AI engineers, and you need really skilled kind of real estate people with technology heads.
Yeah.
And so I would certainly, if I was a CTO in a big real estate business, I certainly wouldn't be doing nothing. There are use cases and things that I would want the team to be experimenting with and playing with, but I'm going to build an AI product in our business that will do all of our AI for us, and it's fine. I'll just use Azure tools or Google. It's just, I feel like a really, really big undertaking that very few people can execute.
Yeah, it's where the kind of innovation and the ideas hit the real world, and things don't work quite as planned. And I agree. I think it's amazing vibe coding for bringing proof of concepts to life. So you're not describing
it's incredible
it, you can show
for wireframes and mocking up.
Yeah.
Like we basically now in our business in product and engineering talk by trading different like interactive user interfaces that we've made.
Yeah.
It's incredible. Like visualizing stuff and then experiencing it is such a good way to communicate.
And that's what it's good for at the moment. I'm sure it will evolve, but that I say with AI, there's different tools for different purposes. And sometimes we shouldn't be trying to compete against some of the stuff that's already out there. You should leverage it, whether that's the foundational models, whether it's products like yours. And there is an argument for that kind of generalized tool across the whole organization, whether that's Copilot or something else, and then vertical tools for any of the use cases. But I think you're on a fool's errand if you're going to try and create every single one of your own tools, because then even if it works, right, even if miracle upon miracle it works, you've then got to maintain it, right?
Well, this is like that. You haven't even got into maintenance and support, right? Like, because if you build your wonderful system, say on Gemini 2.5, in 12 months, Gemini 2.5 probably won't even be available.
I know.
So like, who's done the work of like restructuring all of your tooling, all of your prompting, any tuned models you've got, and testing them against this new model set you'll have to use? Like that whole cycle is like it's a big piece of work.
Yeah,
We love
you've got to know
it,
what
so
you're
it's
stepping in
fine.
for.
But that's our specialism, right? Yeah,
exactly.
So I guess to some extent, then there's kind of credence to diversifying the tools you're using, right? And the AI systems you have. I mean, model agnostic is one thing, having vertical tools, having more generalist tools. There's a whole host of angles you can take to try and drive a lot of value for the business. Johnny, if you had to redesign an AI strategy from scratch for a real estate firm, where would you start?
So we talk a lot with a lot of, and I think this came from one of our customers, about like crawl, walk, run. So I don't think really there's any real estate business that can keep their commitment to transformation without an early win. So my starting point would be, let's find the use case that I can measure. Is there a third party supplier we can outsource? Is there something that's core to our revenue, maybe our net operating income, maybe it can reduce our operational costs? And I can measure it and I can put a dollar or pounds symbol against it and find it, define it, get everyone excited about it, and then go find someone that can solve it. And I think not many people remember to do that first step, basically. And that should buy you the grace and the time to be a bit more experimental and a bit more like, hey, look, we're not entirely sure if rolling this awesome tool out to 500 people is immediately going to transform our business. But remember, we saved $3 million on this implementation. That was the last thing we did. So come on, give me a break.
So some goodwill in the bank.
Yeah,
that's what you want.
Yeah. So I think, and those use cases, particularly now, really, really do exist. And those opportunities do exist. I would probably also spend a lot of money on training, or invest very deliberately on training, championing, and change management. 100%. So what I would want to build in-house is less, hey, I'm going to build this technology in-house, and much more, I'm going to build training expertise, change management expertise, and kind of the ability to match problem with solution and teach my people in my business to go on that journey.
Yeah, no,
one of the best tips I've had from one of the internal kind of project management teams we work with is like, deploy something into a live deal, which I think is excellent. An excellent tiny tip, right? Like if you're working, like, especially like if you really want engagement, don't deploy it when no one's got any big pressing projects on.
Seeing is believing, right?
Go find the deadline, sit with them, get it over the line, kind of thing.
I found that
also deadlines are very powerful. Externally committed deadlines, certainly. Like the businesses we see like really driving change and moving forward have normally made a board level promise or something like that something will happen by a specific date, and using that to really like push forward and change.
Yeah, because it's so easy to drift, isn't it, in this world? You could keep pushing it down the road because things keep changing, but I think that's absolutely right. And I also fully agree with the trying to find some use cases in real life environments where it has people have got vested interests in it, because there's nothing like seeing is believing in this world.
Yeah.
So, Johnny, I just want to moving on to the last section, really. I just want to ask you a bit about you, really. So what's something in your day-to-day life that you wish you could automate? I heard that you used Notion before, so that's quite interesting to me. But is there any parts of your day-to-day life that you wish you could automate?
I wish I could automate.
Or you plan to automate?
I mean, I am one of the most deeply involved kind of automation people across so many tools right now that I fear there's not much left.
You're going to have to teach
me.
Do you
know what? This is a really silly thing. Obviously, we're a growing business. I spend a lot of time hiring. But the system we use for tracking our applicants, you can't export CVs from.
Mm-hmm.
And I have this really nice process where I actually use our tool and use our memories to like memorize scorecards for different roles. And I drop the CV into the system and it gives me a scorecard out. But because of the setup of our applicant tracking system, our HR system, I cannot automate getting the application out. It's really annoying because it's not the hard part of the process. You've got this incredible technology that's kind of searching the internet, researching the companies they've worked at, like has particular controls about not being biased, all that kind of stuff. And the thing that's kind of the blocker is actually just getting the PDF out of the SAS.
Yeah, no, I feel your pain. There's always these little bugs that you just can't get around. And my big frustration is there's so many tools out there that I love, and I use Notion as well, but then I use Evernote, and then I use another tool called Motion, and I just feel like I've over bloated it all. And there's probably a simpler way of doing it. Do you ever have the same kind of thought with
I am a big fan. Yeah, I'm a big fan of rationalizing, actually. And so I have previously used Evernote, but I shifted to just using Notion and Google Docs.
I'm going to need to pick your brains about that later then.
Yeah, I love the tab. I love the newish tab functionality on a Google Doc where you can set tabs. So, and then a lot of work I'm doing, obviously, I really use AI a lot for helping me think, work through problems, spot things I'm missing. So what I will do is I kind of almost have this and you'll see it if you ever read an internal doc of me of 5D, you'll see like the bottom tab is just like semi-coherent thoughts. And you'll see me stepping through as I work through it. But I like to keep all of the stages because that maintains the kind of context of your thinking and keeps your journey. And then you have your output at the end. And you can then kind of return and make sure you've not got lost or not got misdirected. But yeah, Google Docs is nice for that. The most magic thing we're doing right now for me, not for our customers, so we have all of our customer usage data in BigQuery, Big Data Warehouse. We do a lot of user research. And essentially, I have a button I can push that will create the equivalent of someone, data analyst, spending like 2 hours individually analyzing a single user's usage. And I absolutely love it because I've done that in my career as an analyst, right? And I love being able to do things like you would never be able, 5 years ago, I would never be able to do user level analysis without having to think really hard whether it was worth analyzing this user. Whereas now, obviously it costs a bit of money, but I can do it at scale really quickly. And it's
liberating, isn't it?
Yeah, it creates such deep insights on what people are using, what people need, what people want, that I really love it.
Yeah. And that's just something you've done in your spare time. Amazing.
Yes, I spend a lot of time parallel running in all different systems to kind of benchmark and keep my taste on what's best for what.
So interesting. I definitely will be picking your brain on the whole rationalization because I think I'm well overbloated. But before we finish,
I've been there.
You will be getting a call. What's one question that you wish we asked you before we finish?
One question you wish me asked. That is excellent. We've not talked about what's coming, have we?
So what's coming?
No, we've not really talked about what's next.
With fifth dimension?
Generally, I think. But one leads to the other. So I think the really big thing over the next year is how you can, like the really most performant kind of AI products and AI systems, and maybe AI empowered people, what they're going to have transitioned from is kind of thinking about prompting, which is kind of like how to draft the right prompt, how to do that, to thinking about how can I provide the right context for the task I'm doing.
Yeah, they're calling it context engineering, aren't they?
They are calling it context engineering. Yeah. It's quite a hot debate about whether it should just be prompt engineering, but I think it should be called context engineering.
It is different enough, I think.
Well, more than a prompt, beyond the prompt, it becomes other things, tools, data, use things.
So context engineering is also much closer to engineering than prompting is. And so, but what it does do is if you have a task and the system you're working with, say you're taking a look at a specific deal, if the system understands what that deal is, your company's kind of priorities, how it fits into your investment strategy, the quality of the work you can do is 10x if it's the first time, if the system is like new to it. So what we've been working on and what we've injected a lot of into the system recently, and what I specifically think the technology now enables, is much, much better context learning in the background and engineering, which means you can get further out of the box, basically, and create more value and have less time lifting and shifting big lumps of text everywhere. But I think for the typical user, that's going to be really transformational because instead of it being like the 1% who's happy to like create stores of context in different documents or different file systems and kind of lift and shift them around. Like you hear about people using like Claude Code to create a second brain on the internet, and it sort of, turns everything they see into this amazing data set, supposedly. Actually, we're going to be able to do that in the background for users, so that every time you write a valuation report, every time you underwrite a deal, every time you do your quarterly asset reporting, the system will build context that will make it better for you next time. And I find that really, really exciting, because actually what that enables is for us to put more power into users' hands, because the system can surface this and learn this, but the user can control it, edit it, remove it, add it, approve it, add to it.
And it is a very different skill, isn't it? Because when I use things like Manus, which is more of an agent, your typical prompts don't work. You need to provide that context engineering as well. But I think it's going to be a challenge, because we're still getting people's heads around prompt engineering. So
yes, I'm hoping most people, I hope, aren't going to have to think about it in an engineering sense, but can think about it more from like, what does my tool know? And I think that's our job as building product, to make that as easy as possible and accessible as possible.
So it becomes
really visible.
Yeah, exactly. So you just have a conversation with it.
It happens invisibly, but it's extremely visible what context is being used, what rules are being used, what assumptions are being used.
Yeah, but you're not expecting users to engineer it. That's happening in the background. Got it. Okay. No, I'm glad we spoke about that. It's very interesting. So, Johnny, I think we kind of reached the end. Was there anything else from you, Yoshi?
No, all good. I think you covered every angle there. You asked. Yeah. We've got to the question that we haven't asked.
It was brilliant to have you on, Johnny. Thank you so much. And
thank you for inviting me. It's been a great conversation. Yeah, absolutely. Do invite me back.
Always a pleasure to talk to you, and I will be picking your brain about Notion as well.
I can talk for a very long time on like the intersection of personal productivity, note systems, and AI.
Cool. You've done it now. Cool. Thank you very much, Johnny. We'll speak to you soon.
Take care. Bye.
Project Flux is here.
That's a wrap for today's episode. But before you go, exciting news. Project Flux is teaming up with Project Management Global to bring you the latest in AI-driven project delivery and essential management insights. Through this partnership, expect weekly AI insights, practical tools, and expert thought leadership, ensuring you stay ahead in the evolving project landscape. Stay tuned for exclusive content, joint research, and strategies to supercharge your project outcomes. You can learn more at www.pm-global.co.uk and be part of the future of project management. See you later.
Project Flux is here.
Just want to give a big shout out to our sponsors, Construct AI. For anyone interested in looking at Construct AI, the link's in our show notes. There's a free tier that you can play around with. Yoshi and I have been using it for a good year since it was originally launched, and we get a huge amount of value out of it. So I thoroughly encourage everyone to go onto the Construct AI site and have a play around.
Cool. And guys, before we sign off, please don't forget to share, follow, and like all of our stuff. So that helps us to engage with you and understand a bit more about what you want, so we can bring it to your doorstep as early as possible.
See you later, everyone.